Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us today for our Sign and Seal Submittals with Bluebeam Revu Webinar. We are very excited to have you guys here with us today, and Ari's going to be presenting for you guys, but before we get to that, we're just going to go ahead and go over some logistics. So Ari, if you can jump to that next slide for me. Okay, so all attendees will be muted during the presentation. If you guys do have any questions or anything come up throughout the presentation, please send them over. You can send those in the questions box or in the chat box. The webcast will be recorded, and that's going to be sent out to you if you registered for the webinar today. And it'll actually be available on our YouTube channel as well. Okay, Bluebeam Revu training is available, and if you have any questions or want to look into that at all, please definitely do reach out to us. And another thing here, very important today, for those of you who are interested in receiving AIA continuing education credit for attending today, please send us your name and your AIA number via the chat box through the presentation. Earlier rather than later would be great, so we're not scrambling at the last second to collect them. So please send those over whenever you can. And throughout the presentation or later on, if you'd like to contact us here at the office, our number is 305-445-6480. And our email is info@ddscad.com. All right, so without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Ari.
Thank you very much, Alan. All right, hello everybody. It is really nice to be here today and to present this presentation to you all. We're going to be learning about stamps, how to flatten our documents properly, the difference between second and third party authentication, and batch signing tools. So let's go to our little poll question. We do have an interesting question today that I'd like to ask you all so I can learn a little bit more about how you're using stamps and seals. So what kind of stamp or seal do you use? Alan, I think, will turn on a poll within GoToWebinar. And there it is. It's open now. Perfect. So yeah, please let me know, guys. I know that many people use their companies or municipalities logo depending on where they're working at. Architects and engineers, of course, have their own seals that are registered by the state, sometimes from Florida, sometimes from other states. There are also dynamic stamps that have different kinds of JavaScript that are involved with them, and they actually can change based on the input data that you give them. And many people don't use stamps or seals, but they'd like to learn more, or they don't really need one. So I'd like to know everybody's input here. All right, fantastic. Now, the window's a little small for me, so Alan, why don't you tell us the results?
Yep, absolutely. So for my company or municipality's logo, we have 8%, as well as I don't need or I don't use a stamp or seal at the moment. Those are both 8%. Next one up the list, a dynamic stamp for review and shop drawings is 11%. Then I don't use an electronic stamp or seal, but I want to create one, 16%, and 58% my architectural, engineering, or other licensed seal.
Very good, excellent. So some people actually have a dynamic stamp. That's really, really good to know. Excellent. All right, fantastic. Okay, so let's look at our overview of today's webinar. I already discussed a little bit of it in our title screen, but we're going to be talking about stamps right from the get-go. We're going to learn how to place them, how to modify them. Dynamic text is very cool as well. It will pick up on certain data from our computers, for example. So the date, for example, is the most common one. It can also pick up on certain file path information. And JavaScript can also be input into stamps. So we'll talk about that as well. Then we're going to go into preparing submittals, how to prepare them properly before we sign. So we do want to flatten all of our markups, create all of our signature fields, and potentially add some security permissions based on who we're submitting to and what they need to do on our document, whether they need to stamp, et cetera, et cetera. Then we're also going to talk about digital IDs, what they are, how to place somebody else's digital ID into our Trusted Identities list, and how to attach our digital ID with the file attachments tool. This is very important when giving the digital ID to someone. Then, of course, at the end, we'll talk about our signature types and we'll finally sign our document. We're going to learn about document certification compared to regular signatures, third-party authentication compared to second-party, and batch signing, which is available with Revu Extreme. So let's get right into it. And I'm going to hide my camera for now so that we can see the screen a little bit better. Perfect. All right, I will switch over now to Bluebeam Revu. So I have Bluebeam Revu open right now, and I have a document open. So firstly, let's learn about stamps. Now, I already have a stamp right here, and this is one that I placed earlier. It's just this example seal that I created recently. So I did this by going to the Tools dropdown, mousing over Stamp, and we can see that I have this full list of stamps here. You can also see that there's a shortcut next to Stamp. This icon means that we can find the same icon, which happens to be at the top of my screen, and it's right here, and we can quickly click on it and see that same list. So there's many different shortcuts and fast ways to access our stamps. So my most recent stamp was my seal, and I have a few others here. So let's use my seal as an example. And you can see that whenever I mouse over a stamp, you can see there's a little pencil to the right of it. So we're just going to click on that pencil. We'll edit it first, and then we'll place it afterwards. So here's my stamp, and this seal, most of it came from Bluebeam Revu as an example. I believe it is this one, this seal.pdf file right here. So I modified it a little bit, and I added some text here. Now, what I've done is I've actually added a set date so that when we place the stamp, it just has this date forever. This is just a regular text box, as we can see. But whenever you're modifying a stamp, if you have a text box or if you create one, if you double click in the text box, you'll see a special dropdown that's only available for stamps, and it's called the dynamic dropdown. This is where we can have dynamic text. Now, before I use it, I'm going to highlight the entire date, and I'm now going to click on the dynamic dropdown. This is all the information that can automatically be input into our stamp. So instead of using this fixed date, I'm actually just going to change it to this date right here. And this is the code that is used in order to turn this text into dynamic text. So it's going to be the and sign, brackets with date. This is the same code for time, for example. So it's brackets or and sign brackets and then time. Usually there's a space in between, so it would look like that. And you can do this with all kinds of information. The date is the most common one. So with text, I press the escape key when I'm done editing it. And I'm just going to move this a little bit up because it's not quite centered. And there we go. So our date should center itself nicely. And what I'm going to do just in case is I'm actually going to stretch this text box to accommodate a rather long date just in case, because if the text box is too small, the date is not going to fit in it properly. So there's a little tip for you guys. So my stamp is now ready. I'm now going to save my stamp. It's just another PDF file, basically. You can see that if I mouse over the file, it shows us that at the end it says seal.arexample.pdf. So I'll save this. Now I'm going to close it. Now, when you're modifying a stamp, it's already in the program. But if you want to import a stamp, you'll want to go to Tools and Stamp, and then Import is all the way at the bottom. So even if you make one with Bluebeam Revu, or if you wanted to import one, you do have to click on Import first and then locate it. So now I'm just going to click on my stamp and I'm going to place it on the drawing. And so what's going to happen is if we click right here, there is the date. Now this is actually picking up on today's date. So I know it's hard to tell between both stamps, but this stamp had the fixed date and this one has that new dynamic text. If today was of course the 17th, which I could simulate by changing my date and time right now, it would actually pick up on the right date. So this worked, and now we know that it'll fit, and that's about the width that we need. So that's how we can create a stamp and use dynamic text with a stamp. It's quite easy. Let's go back to our PowerPoint just to see if I missed anything. JavaScript, yes. Let's look at a fancy stamp that I created with one of our clients. I don't think he'll mind if I share it. So we're going to go back to Tools and Stamp. And this special stamp is right here. It's the submittal review stamp by one of our clients that we created. Alan, actually, our host of the presentation, helped me with this. He's familiar with JavaScript. So I clicked on the stamp and I'm ready to place it. I'm just going to place it up here because I know it's rather large. So I'm just going to click. I could click and hold and resize the stamp to any size that I want, but I just want to click once and let go and leave it at the original size. What's really cool is that we now get this JavaScript window, and it's now going to ask us to choose one of 4 statuses. Now, we actually did get this stamp from Bluebeam's website. However, their stamp is a little bit different. And you know what, actually? Just because it is not our stamp, and we should actually probably use Bluebeam stamp. I think that may be best. It looks like I don't have it. That's okay. I'll just use our clients. So we can choose any of the statuses. I'm going to choose revise and resubmit. I can give a project of 1, 2, 3 and the submittal number of ABC. I ordered that wrong, but that's okay. And so we'll just click OK. And now here is our new stamp. And we can see that a check was placed in this box for the stamp. And we have all this very useful information that I input, some of it manually, some of it automatically. For example, it found my computer's username and it's using that. So I can also change that with some code. Now, what does this stamp look like when we edit it? If we go to Tools and Stamp, and we go and we click on the little pencil icon here, we can see that there's a lot of form fields here. So a lot of this is being input automatically. But how is that being input? Well, there's an extra form field right here in this corner. It's actually invisible when the stamp is placed, and it doesn't really exist when the stamp is placed. However, it does exist. So to access this, I have a few things that I can do. Because I have Review Extreme, I can right-click next to a group of my side panels and mouse over Show, and I have the Forms option right here. I can also turn on links, and I'm going to put that on my right side. I can click and drag this and move it up like that. Let's put Forms right here. There we go. Sometimes these panels will close themselves when you close the program. So with Forms, I can now see all the different kinds of form fields here. And what's interesting is I have calculation at the end. So I can select it, and it automatically makes my form fields dark blue. We're now in form mode, which I've talked about in previous webinars. And now I can essentially see that this one is highlighted. What I need to do now is go to my properties panel, the gear wheel right here. I'm now going to scroll all the way down until we see some special form field options that we have under actions. Actions and calculate. So calculate is where we want to go. This is a custom calculation field. Usually these form fields are basically saying that the value isn't calculated. So this is a custom calculation field. Now, Bluebeam did write most of this text. So they're saying, warning, do not edit this. It's okay, we're going to click on edit. And it basically says to see the global JavaScript session for customization. So this JavaScript should not be touched. This is the driving force behind it. But if we click on global scripts, we can see that there's a lot more information here. So this information is what Alan helped to edit for our client. So for example, if we scroll down just a little bit, we can see value reviewed, reviewed and noted. All of that was modified properly. So that's how we basically customized our statuses for that stamp and customize those form fields. An IT specialist can help you all if you want to try and use JavaScript with your stamps. Okay, great. So that's basically all about stamps in a nutshell. Let us go back to our PowerPoint presentation and see what is next. Let's prepare our submittals. So we need to do a few things before we actually get into the submittal. We're going to be flattening our markups, creating the signature fields, and assigning security permissions. So to flatten your markups, there are a few ways to do it. You can use the select tool at the bottom of the screen, and then you can basically just zoom out on your page and make a big box over all of your markups. And that way, you can highlight all of them just like that. Now, that is a very quick way of flattening because once you select them, you can just right-click on top of one of the markups, and we have the flatten option. Once you do this, and once you save your file, this is a permanent action and cannot be undone. So you need to be careful when doing this. So instead of flattening that way, we could use the flatten dialog, and we can access that by going to the document dropdown and mousing over flatten. Now we can see this dialog where we can choose what kinds of assets on our page should be flattened. So if I want to flatten all of my images, I can do that. If I only want to flatten my images, I can uncheck the box at the top next to type and just click on image, for example. But because I'm preparing for a submittal, I want to flatten everything all at once. Then I would want to allow for markup recovery if I want someone to unflatten my markups in the future. Now, for a working file, this could be useful, but for a submittal, this is unnecessary and this should be unchecked. That way, nobody can go and open your file in their version of Bluebeam Revu and click on unflatten. It also isn't really necessary. So in this case, I would click OK and flatten my file. I'm not going to do it right now because there's no need to. And before I do this, I do want to make a copy of my file before signing. Now, if I was to sign one page, Bluebeam Revu will prompt me to rename my file. But if you're going to use the batch tool, it doesn't. When we get into the batch tool, I'll demonstrate that further. So just in case, I'm going to do a save as. I'm going to save my file as _submittal, and I'll just save it right there. So now this file is going to be the one that I use for my submittal. So in that case, I will flatten everything. I just have to go to the dialog and click OK because I know that everything is selected here, and all 6 pages will be flattened. Done. Now I can't click on any markups. This is very good because some programs don't detect markups properly, and markups created in Revu are slightly different from markups created in other PDF programs. Now that the markups are flattened to the document, it's just like you created a document from a CAD, BIM, or Word program. because now all the assets are flattened just like the lines that came from those other programs like these doors and walls, and the markups are now functioning the same way. It's all just visual data. Now, what's nice is that markups are vector data. So you can see that as we zoom in on them, they continue to refresh themselves. So they are smart data. We can snap to them. So if I use the line tool, for example, I can draw from markup to markup, for example, because now they're considered content. If you go to the tools dropdown and mouse over toolbars, you can turn on your status bar, and that way you can turn on snap to content right here. So that's how we know that all these markups are now content. So we flattened the document. What's next is signature fields. So to create signature fields, we need to go to our signature panel. It's this little ink pen icon. And we have two buttons. One of them I don't really like, which is the first one called Sign Document. This one is used by almost all my clients unless they train with me. And the reason why I don't like it is because when you use it and you make a signature field, it automatically opens the signature dialog. And let's say that you cancel out of the dialog, it automatically deselects your signatures, which is useful and allows you to quickly go back into markup mode, but it doesn't really teach you how to delete a signature field and how to modify them. Because right now I can't. If I right click on a signature field, nothing happens. And that's because we're in regular markup mode, and all we can do in this mode is click on a signature field to sign. We don't want to do that right now. I want to delete the signature field and recreate it. I can do that by using the second button called Add Signature Field. This is great because now when I click on this button, it allows me to place my field, and the form fields do turn dark blue. So now we are in form mode. I can select an existing signature field. I can move it around. I can make it bigger or smaller with the yellow grips, for example. And then I can right click on it, and I have the option to delete it. Now, in Review Extreme, I also have the option to copy a signature field. This is useful if the batch tool is having any issues and you just want to copy a signature field on 10 different pages. I can essentially do the following. I can copy the signature field right here. And what I've done is I've turned on my paste and place shortcut right here. Just so you guys know, I did that by going to Tools, Toolbars, and then Customize. Paste in place is found under the Edit category. Here it is. And on my toolbars at the top of my screen, I make sure to select Edit. And then I've already placed in place here. But if it wasn't here, I would just select it on the left side and then use the arrow to move it to the items, and then use these blue arrows after I select it, of course, to move it all the way below paste, just like this. So paste in place, I could use my keyboard shortcuts as well, Control, Shift, and V. So let's make sure that I copy this properly. Copy, and then I'm going to go to our second page. So let's go to, I can just do that by holding Control and moving my mouse wheel down. So now I'm just going to do Control, Shift, V, and that signature field is in the exact same spot that it was in the previous page. So then I can go to the next page, Control, Shift, V, and there it is again. And I can continue to do this for all of my documents if my title block is the same for all of them. Now, let's get rid of these extra signature fields that I just created, and let us go back to our first page. Now, signature fields need to be created ahead of time if you're going to use document certification. This is why I don't recommend that you use document certification, and document certification is not necessary if you have a third-party authenticated signature. The first party is any person that is signing. So I would be the first party in this case because I'm signing my document. The second party is the program that you're using. So Bluebeam Revu is the second party. And the third party is a company that you would give certain information to, and they would basically validate that you're a real person. And they would give you a special signature. And that signature would be third-party authenticated because they are the third party. These companies include IdenTrust, DocuSign, GlobalSign, Entrust. So there's several of them, and certain municipalities in Florida especially require certain third-party authenticated signatures. So we have our signature fields placed, and if we do need to make them after we sign afterwards, if you're expecting someone else to sign after you, you don't know exactly how many people are going to be signing your file, that's okay, because if you use a regular signature, then they can sign after. Now, let's make sure I didn't miss anything. Yes, security permissions. Let's get into that before I actually sign the document. So you could use security permissions in your document, and you can do this by going to the document dropdown, and we can click on security right here. Now, I don't recommend doing this if you're expecting other people to stamp your file, to sign your file, etc. But if you're not expecting anyone to touch it and you don't want your assets to be modified in any way, then you can click on Change Permissions down here. This allows you to require a password to open the document, which usually you don't want to do. Usually you want to require a password to print, copy, or edit your documents. So once you do this, you can then turn on or off certain permissions down here. For example, if printing is okay, but you don't want changes, copying, or extraction, then you can allow for printing. Now, actually, this is the other way around, sorry. The allow for printing basically is turned on here. So changes and other things must be turned off for it to work properly. So now printing is the only thing that's allowed, basically. So that's what I meant. Okay, great. And the encryption, by the way, down here is set to the best encryption. You don't have to worry about changing this. I did some research, and apparently 128-bit AES is more secure than these two. So that's security in a nutshell. You just need to put in your master password and verify it when you're ready, and then you save. And you can secure as many pages as you want to, or only certain pages of your document by clicking on this drop down here. So that's basically security, not going to be used as often from what I know from our clients that I've worked with. So let's go back to our PowerPoint presentation. Let's look at digital IDs before we sign so we can understand what we're going to be signing exactly. So, or what we're going to be using to sign. So a digital ID can be created for your first time if you click on a signature, and then usually you don't have to click on new because you won't see this dialog. You'll see this dialog instead. So if you don't have a digital ID in your computer, this dialog will open, and you have three options. The first one allows you to find a digital ID that you were given by a third-party authenticated company. So if you're looking for one, you basically need to browse for it and click on next, and then you need to find the PFX file. It is a .pfx. A P is in Paul. So basically that file is a very special file. You can also just click on Create Digital ID File. This is only going to be second-party authenticated if you do this, because you're using Bluebeam Revu to create your digital ID. This is sometimes not accepted by certain municipalities. So mine was created in this way. All I did was I input my name, my email address, my password down here. All the other settings are fine as they are, and that's it. And basically, that's where my digital ID came from. Now, where can we manage and find our digital IDs? We can do this by going to the Tools dropdown, mousing over Signature, and clicking on Digital IDs right here. Now we can see the list of digital IDs that are used to sign. So I am now using my digital ID to sign. It is currently logged out, but I can log in when I'm ready to sign. Also, we can see my expiration date. So I created this back in 2019. And so a digital ID that has a 10-year expiration date more than likely is a second-party authenticated one created with a program. Most digital IDs that are third-party authenticated usually last for 2 to 4 years, depending on the type that you purchase from that company. All right, now, a digital ID also has appearances associated with it. So just so you know, we can select it in this list and click on Manage Appearances. And this allows us to see the different kinds of appearances that I've created for my digital ID. I can also select any of them and click on the Modify Appearance button right here. So I can modify them right here without having to actually try and sign something. So if you need to modify your signature's appearance, you can do so. We're going to get into the signature appearance a little bit later, so let's not worry about it right now. All right. So this is how you can manage your digital IDs. What's very important is that when you need to send your digital ID to someone to place into their Trusted Identities list, sometimes this is necessary, sometimes this is not, because the third-party authenticated digital IDs tend to come with enough information to be validated by themselves. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. So what you can do is you can select a digital ID and you can click on Export right here. It's going to ask me for my password, so I'll log in. You only have to do this once per instance in which the program is open, basically. So you don't have to worry about it if your program has been open for a while and you signed in an hour ago. It's not a problem. But if you close the program and open it again, you do need to sign in again. So when I export my digital ID, I have this special .cer file. If you get one from a third-party company, they are actually giving you the .pfx file, and contained within the pfx file is a .cer file as well. Once you install that pfx file onto your computer and into Bluebeam Revu, then you'll have access to the .cer file as well. So here's mine. I've already done this back in 2020, and I'm not going to worry about exporting it now, but this is how you would export it. Now, we're basically ready to look at a couple things. Let me just go back to our presentation. Let's look at trusted identities and then file attachments. Yes. So The Trusted Identities list is also found by going to Tools and Signature, and Trusted Identities is right below Digital IDs. Here we can see that there's different kinds of people that can be trusted here. Now, we trust ourselves, of course. So my digital ID automatically went into this list. I did not have to place it here. At the same time, I was testing a digital ID from one of my clients, and basically he has a digital ID from IGCA1, which translates to IdenTrust. Now, we were just doing some tests, and we wanted to make sure that if he sent me this, that basically I could validate his document. And it did, and it worked very well. And so how did he give me this digital ID? Well, you can't send a digital ID via email. If you try to send it as an attachment, it will not let you download the attachment. It'll actually show a little red circle with a slash going through it, meaning that it's basically locked. So there is another way to send a digital ID. And by the way, digital IDs don't contain passwords, so you don't have to worry about sending proprietary information over them. They just have some code and some information that allows your computer to detect whether or not a signature was created on a certain computer at a certain time by a certain person from a certain third-party company, et cetera, et cetera. So what do I need to do? If I wanted to attach my digital ID, such as the one that I've attached right here, I just need to go to the Tools dropdown and click on File Attachment. Then I need to locate my digital ID. So mine happens to be right here. And then I'll click on Open. My cursor shows a plus sign, and in my Properties panel, it says File Attachment Properties. Now, if I just click anywhere, you'll see that there's a little paperclip. The issue with this icon is that as I zoom in, the paperclip gets smaller and smaller. And as I zoom out, it gets bigger, but it's still relatively small at this threshold. So I also want my icon to match what I've just attached. So in Properties, we can see that there's the icon tab here, and I can switch to different icons, such as graphs, which also get smaller and smaller. And the file icon, my favorite one. This shows you exactly what kind of file you're attaching. If it was a PDF, it would show the Bluebeam PDF logo. It would show that rectangular PDF. So this one is a certificate file. It's a .cer file. And now I know that I've attached it properly. So I have already done this. This is a duplicate, so I'll just delete that one. Oh, I flattened my document. So this one is actually not clickable anymore. Once you flatten a file attachment, it actually gets stuck to the page like this. So this attachment now, when I select it, I have the option to either in Properties click on Extract, or I learned recently, it's pretty self-explanatory, you can just double click on it. And when you do this, you have the option to do Save As, and basically you can then save that to your computer and then input this into Trusted Identities. I would go to Tools, Signature, Trusted Identities, click on the plus sign right here, and then I would basically find my digital ID. There it is. It's looking for a .cer file, and there it is. Now, if we're submitting to a city, we don't need to worry about this step at all. We just need to give them a digital ID, put it on our page, and basically hope that they understand how to place it into Trusted Identities. If they don't, you can have them call me, for example. Now, if you're a municipality, this is where you do need to find your client's digital ID. Hopefully they put it next to their signature. Select it and basically double click on it, save it, and then put it into your Trusted Identities list. This may not be necessary, but if you're experiencing what's called the signer's identity unknown error in your signature panel, this may be the solution. I'd recently learned of another solution. I may as well talk about it now. If you're experiencing the signer's identity unknown issue when you receive a document from someone else, this could mean one of two things. It could mean that their signature does not have enough information and the digital ID must be placed into your Trusted Identities list, or you need to download very special files that the federal government has basically reissued, and they reissue them every few years. I believe the last time they made a change to this was back last year around April. So what happens is usually the client needs to install those two files into their certificate manager in Windows. And I'm not going to get into that today because it's a whole other process. But if anybody has any questions about this, they can always contact me and I can show them how it works. And usually just the client has to install those two files and then sign their file again and send it off. And usually that works well. I learned very recently that everybody's federal files that come from the US government expire at different times based on when their computer was created, or essentially when their operating system was managed. As a result, we all need to eventually download these two files into our certificate manager and replace the old ones. When I did this, this fixed the signer's identity error, and I was able to validate all of my clients' files that they all happen to be using IdenTrust. It seems like some of the other third-party companies are not experiencing the exact same issue and don't require the federal files to be replaced, but they may eventually also require that. So just to let you guys know. Let's actually finally sign some stuff. Let me make sure that I talked about everything here. Let's get into signing. So I just have these existing signature fields. I could use this one if I want to. In this case, if I want to use my seal, I think I will use this one. So I'm just going to click on this, and now I can sign. Now, for some reason, my password didn't stick, so I'll just type it in again. There we go. So now we're going to start from the top and look at signature type. We can use a regular digital signature or document certification. Document certification has different options with this permitted changes after certifying dropdown. We can say that we don't want any changes to be made to our document. We can allow others to fill in forms in digital signatures, or we can also allow for people to create markups in our file while still certifying the file. The issue is that no matter what choice you make, extra signature fields cannot be created after the first time this is signed. That's a problem if you're expecting a unknown amount of people to sign after you. For example, if I was an architect, I need to send my file to an engineer, to the contractor, to the city, to a subcontractor, and all of them need to sign my file. And I don't know exactly how many subcontractors there are, so they all need to be able to create signature fields on my file. Therefore, document certification seems to be unnecessary at this juncture. And digital signature seems to be very, very flexible. And with third-party authentication, a digital signature is essentially certified and validated. Now, your document can be modified after you sign with a digital signature. How do we prevent this? I'll show you right now because it's actually really, really cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sign. Firstly, I'm going to check my appearance and make sure everything looks good. I have a reason here, so I can type in some legal text here and include that in my signature. I'm going to click on edit right down here. And we're going to see this specific signature's appearance because I have 3 different appearances like I showed you all earlier. This one, what I've done is I've turned off the Bluebeam logo in the background. It actually seems to be hidden because of the file that I put there. That's funny. So when you have name in the front, then the Bluebeam logo is visible. So I'd like to turn that off. I'm now using file instead. My seal, a similar seal that we saw earlier, is being used. And I have my name and my date turned on. I don't need any legal text in this case. Then I switch my position from left or right to background. And I set my font size, and I did some experimenting to make sure that my font would basically fit rather nicely on top of the seal. So font size 8 seems to be pretty good. Now this all depends on the size of your signature field as well. So font size 8 may be too small. We'll see. I'm actually going to try 10 in this case based on my signature field size and see if that works. So I'm going to click OK. And these settings are ready. If I want to, I can switch between different appearances with this dropdown. So I can go to my name appearance. This one just has my name in big bold letters. This one also includes the reason. And then I have a really interesting one that says basically stamp underscore no text. This means that this is invisible. The signature basically has everything turned off. The reason for this is I use this signature with the batch signing tool if I'm experiencing any bug with the batch tool. We're going to get into that right at the end. So I'm now going to use my stamp signature. I'm going to click OK. Review will ask me in this case to rename my file, which is great. Because I don't want to modify the submittal file that I created, I'll just put underscore DS at the end for digital signature. I'm going to click on save. And there it is. We now have our file. It looks like it put the text very nicely on this line that was centered very well. What I recommend is if you do want to put some automatic text from Bluebeam Revu, you can essentially have an empty portion in the middle of your seal and just adjust some of the text and the other data in your seal to the top and the bottom of the seal. So this one, I've kind of done that. You can actually see that the data right here from our stamp, because this was basically a seal that's using that stamp, did not automatically pick up on the date. This is because I'm essentially using the wrong seal for this purpose, and there's no need for this dynamic text here anymore because the date was picked up by the signature itself, as you can see, along with the time. So in the future, I would actually want to delete this text. So this is it. This document has now been signed. Now, when we sign a document for the first time, if we look at our signature panel on the left side, we can see that it shows a yellow icon here. This icon could be red, it could be green, it could be anything, because right now it's basically random. It's also saying signer's identity unknown, which I find very funny. It's always some random error here. So to fix this, all we need to do is click on validate signatures. And now the signature has now read the digital ID information that is found in my trusted identities list and in the signature itself. And so it says signature is valid, everything's looking great, and this text here looks very accurate. Now, how can I tell that my signature is not third-party authenticated? If I click on the plus sign next to authority, it just shows my name. This means that this is a second-party authenticated signature. If it was third-party, it would probably say IGCA1, Federal Global Common, blah, 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 for example. So it would have all kinds of information, and then it'll show you the name of the issuer of the digital ID, and then your name will be all the way at the end, at the bottom. So this is just a second-party authenticated signature. It would not be accepted by the majority of cities and municipalities that I've worked with. All right, so let me make sure I didn't miss anything. Yep, we talked about third-party authentication a lot. And now let's get into some batch signing. Let me show you guys how we can batch sign our files. So firstly, I can't really work with this file too much. However, I do want to show you guys something. I did remember that I want to show you how changes can be made to this file. And it seems like using the digital signature is not secure. I can basically make markups. I can do all kinds of things. You can see my signature panel has now shown the yellow icon with an exclamation mark this time, meaning that the signature hasn't been verified. And if I do validate it, it says it's valid. But if I save this file and now I click on validate again, it says the document has been updated since signed. This is kind of a problem, isn't it? Because now I don't know what work that I did and what I signed, and anybody else could make these modifications. They can right click and flatten them. Actually, I lied. You cannot flatten any markups to a signed file. I tend to forget that sometimes. So that's good news. At least the markups are free floating. Still, at the same time, people can make markups. Another thing that can't be done, luckily, is if you go to edit and PDF content, you cannot cut, erase, or edit text, any vector data text that's already on the file after it's signed. So that's another layer of security that a regular signature already provides, which is quite nice. So still, this file has been modified with markups, and this is not good. How can I ensure that the file that I'm submitting to a municipality is just my file right after I signed without any changes? Well, in our signatures panel, we can see that there's now this new text right here. Click to view this version. If I click on this, it now opens up my file with a slightly different name. It actually uses this file name here, and then it says : signed by me and my email, which is wonderful. So this file has no extra markups on it. Even the signature fields are basically not there. You can see the little red X's there, but you can't fill them in. This means that this version of the file is the official version that can be submitted without any changes, and I can guarantee that. So whenever you're about to send a file to a city, you have two options. You can either send them your file, and they can basically always click to view this version if the file was changed afterwards, and they can see the original themselves. Or after you sign, if you made changes afterwards, you can click to view this version here, and then this file is the one that basically is the official one. So this is the best way to do it. You can even see something interesting here. Notice that at the top of my screen, I have access to the line tool and many other markup tools. But when I go to this version, it gets all grayed out. This version is even more secure than the previous one. You cannot create any markups. So this is how you can really tell what's going on. And look, I can't even access security. While in this one, I can go to security, I can see what's restricted. I can't change anything. When you click on change permissions, nothing happens. But this is how you can truly tell that this version of the document, just by clicking on this simple button, this click to view this version button, this version of the document is the official one and it can't be changed. It's a really, really nice way to get some document security without using document certification, which is great. All right, fantastic. That is the ins and outs of signing in a nutshell, and that it will hopefully help you guys to sign properly and not get your stuff rejected by cities, which happens all the time. But hopefully we can avoid that by doing this properly. Let's get into batch signing and then we'll finish off because we've got 5 minutes left until the Q&A session. So batch signing is really, really cool. Firstly, I can't really use this file to batch sign because I've already signed it. I could technically because I can sign afterwards because I just use a regular digital signature. But just in case, I'm going to open up my original floor plan. Let me just make sure that my side panel is big enough. Perfect. Okay, so I have my floor plan ready. I'm ready to sign. But I want to sign all my pages in the same spot very quickly. So I'm going to go to the batch dropdown and I'm going to click on Sign and Seal. Batch signing is only available in Review Extreme, by the way. So everything I've showed so far, except for being able to copy a signature field, everything else is available in Review Standard. So I'm going to click on Sign and Seal. And then we can see that I can choose which pages I want to sign. In this instance, I only want to sign pages 1 through 3 because the other pages are different sizes. And we can pretend that they're shop drawings, but for me, they're just placeholder drawings, so to speak. So I typed in 1-3 here. I could also sign multiple files at once. So if you are required, there's certain cities that do this. If you're required to have all of your pages as separate files and each one needs to be signed as a separate entity, you can just go to Add, and you can either add files or add a folder. So you can put all of those files in one folder and basically just click on this folder and then you got them all. And you can check the list, make sure they're all here. When you're ready, you would click on Next. Now the batch dialog opens. This does look very similar to the signature dialog on the left side, but there is a nuance that I've learned recently. The reason area in a regular digital signature can be customized. So for mine, I typed, I hereby sign and seal ... Now, in this batch dialog, if we click on the reason dropdown, that's all we can do. We can only choose these pre-existing reasons, and there's no ability for me to type in a new reason here. I submitted this as a feature request to Bluebeam recently, and we're hoping that this gets implemented in the new version that's going to be coming out. So we'll let you guys know what happens in that regard. For now, we can basically see that I can choose between a digital signature or document certification. Just so you guys know, I didn't really explain this before. Document certification can be done without a physical signature on the page. Document certification is technically a background thing, function. So if I choose this right now, I actually don't have a digital signature on my page anymore. You could actually see it on the upper left right here. I'll just move it down here so we have better visibility. And when I turn document certification on, the signature goes away. In the batch tool, you can either use document certification by itself or a digital signature by itself. When you're signing a single page, you can combine both digital signature and document certification together if you wanted to. This is another feature that's lacking in the batch tool, and I believe that I've submitted a feature request for this 2 years ago, probably. So that's how long this has not been implemented. Anyway, now we can move on to our signature's appearance. So I can change it from the stamp one to the name one. So here's the name one right here, for example. Now, the way that this works with the batch tool is that I can resize this box and make this bigger or smaller. And that's okay. The problem is that if I want my text to be a little bit wider, I can't really do that because the box is stretching both horizontally and vertically at the same time. So what I recommend is if you want to use the batch tool and you want your digital signature to appear as a certain size in a certain location, make a signature field in that location first. I have these two signature fields here. So with them in mind, I can go to placement right here and I can change this from manual to signature field. Now my signature is gone, but if I click on one of these signature field boxes right here, now I have resized my signature to fit inside of the box very nicely. Now what I can also do is I can then uncheck, or not uncheck, I can switch my placement from signature field to manual and you'll see something special that just happened. I am now able to move my signature box anywhere I want, and it kept the same size that my signature field before dictated. It's a little trick that I learned if you want to basically not use the signature field itself, but if you want to be able to move your signature around the page. Now, this is actually extremely useful if you don't have signature fields on the second, the third, and the other pages in your document. It will only place a signature in the signature field itself if the option for signature field is turned on. So what do? We would use a signature field as our guide. We would turn that one on, so it's going to be in signature 1. We're going to switch to manual placement. We're not going to move our signature if we like where it is. And we're going to go to page 2 and we're going to check. Now, for some reason, oh, great, it didn't put it in the same location, which is kind of sad. Page 1 also seems to have moved it right over here, which I find very interesting. Let's try that again. Signature field, it's in there. Let's go to page 2. There's nothing here, of course, because there is no signature field here. So let's try and stay on page 2, and then let's see what happens if I switch to manual placement. It puts it up here in the upper left. Oh, well, that's not working as intended. Let's try one more time. If I'm on this page and if I switch to page 2, no, it moves it there. Sometimes it will actually keep it in the same place. In my instance, it's not. Another small bug that's occurring with the batch tool. So sadly, the batch tool does have some bugs and lacks some features. And we'll hope that that gets implemented very soon, because I know that a lot of you have 50 to 100 pages to sign. So for now, you can basically create signature fields on each page, use the paste in place option to do that very quickly, and sign each one. Each page should take about 10 seconds to sign, so it won't take too long to get 100 pages done. Now, if you're experiencing a visual bug with the batch tool, for example, mine is actually looking quite nice, but sometimes when your signature includes a stamp, like mine does right now, sometimes it makes the box around the stamp, you can see mine here, too big. Mine's actually a little bit too big. It has this extra space on the right side and the left side, and I don't really want that. So there's two things I can do. Of course, I can switch to signature field, and then my signature will now fit inside of the box here. This box is not tall enough, but you can see what I'm talking about. Another option that you have is you can basically switch to manual placement, and you can use the invisible appearance for your signature. Now, my signature is basically this box here. It doesn't show anything, but it does exist right here. I can then turn on my seal. I can now find my seal in the upper left of the screen, and I can put my stamp on top of a signature. Now, some municipalities don't allow this. They want you to have your signature as an entity within the signature and not a stamp, essentially. So this, you can basically place this. You can choose a different stamp. So I'll just use my seal right here. I'll just use the seal example one. And so I can place this on top of my signature, and that way people will see the stamp. But if they click on top of the stamp will be flattened. The signature field will then basically be selected. And so you could technically do this and see if that helps if you're having any issues with the batch tool. For now, since there's about 4 issues that I've mentioned today, you may want to just sign each document manually, and you can use some paste in place tools to get that done rather quickly. All right, that is basically everything with the batch tool, and I believe that concludes our presentation. So let's go back to our PowerPoint. Yes, I have covered everything. So I'd like to now see if there's any questions that anyone has.
All right, thanks, Ari. We definitely do have a couple questions that came in. Okay, so the first one is going to be, can a document have more than one digital signature at the same time?
Great question. Now, the answer is yes, but I'll show you some nuances to that. So yes, what I can do is I can sign this document with a regular digital signature. For some reason, Revu is asking me to log in for the 3rd time today. I find that kind of funny. I'm going to do this one with my name. I'll click OK. Let's make this _DS. I've tested that before, so I'll overwrite it. And here's my first signature. Then I'm going to pretend that I'm someone else. I, the architect, have given this to an engineer, so I am now the engineer. I'm now going to sign this with my engineering seal, and I'm going to click OK. Revu is asking me to rename the file a 2nd time, so I can put _ENG or whatever my initials are, for example. And there, we now have 2 signatures on one file. We can go to the signatures panel, and we can see both signatures are here. Now, I haven't validated yet, so I'm going to click on validate. And because this document had a signature placed on top of it, it says signature invalid. But the signature is definitely not invalid. Usually it should still be green. I find that to be interesting. Oh, I think it's because I didn't save my file. No, I don't know why it's saying invalid here. It shouldn't be. Anyway, you can still click to view this version, and you can see the original file where it was signed the first time. So yes, you can sign a file multiple times. If you use document certification, you can only certify the file once, and then subsequent signatures are basically regular digital signatures. So yes, you can sign a file more than once.
Okay, perfect. Okay, next question. I don't see forms under show. I don't know if
I'm
that's...
glad you don't. That means that you do not have Revu Extreme. I did forget to mention that, or maybe I did and I didn't remember to mention it at the end. So the Forms tab, if you right-click mouse over Show, Forms is only available with Revu Extreme. So you won't be able to really access that unless you have Revu Extreme. Sadly, because Revu Extreme allows you to create form fields. If you receive a document that has pre-existing form fields, you can fill them in. So these form fields here, for example, I can type in different kinds of text and we can see what happens. By the way, I've made a calculation field here to show that you can add them up automatically to add up to this field here. Anyway, so yes, forms are only available in Revu Extreme, sadly.
All right. Why is it important to flatten a file?
Flattening is important for a few reasons. This is only for submittal. So before submitting, you do want to be able to have access to your markups if you need to make changes to them. However, before submitting, it is good to flatten a file because you want your assets to be flattened to the page and not accidentally moved by whoever is reviewing your file firstly. Secondly, some programs, other PDF programs, cannot detect markups properly. I know that internally, we were actually looking at some PDFs that I created about 2 or 3 years ago. And what was happening was that some of us were not able to view those markups for some reason. The markups were actually invisible completely. They didn't even exist. And so it seemed like I hadn't actually placed them on the page. As soon as I flattened those markups and sent that PDF once again, internally, my coworker was able to see the markups properly because they were flattened. So flattening is very, very important for visibility, for security. So I would definitely flatten before submittal. Of course, make sure that you make a copy of your file so that you always have your working PDF file and you don't have to recreate that again from CAT or BIM, for example. So definitely flattening is important.
All right. Can you also email a PDF certificate?
Good question. Now, you did call it a PDF certificate. It is called a certificate file and a digital ID. And the answer is no, you cannot email them. If you try, it will go through, but you won't be able to download the certificate from an email. So that's what I was mentioning earlier. You need to attach it to your file as a file attachment. It's the only way to properly send a .cr file via email. Even though the file doesn't have passwords, it still must be sent as an attachment on a PDF. You can test it out for yourself. Try and attach your digital ID to an email and see if you or someone else is able to download it from the email. You'll see that your cursor will show a little red circle with the line going through it, and it means you can't even click on the download button. It'll be like stuck in your email, basically. So that's how that works.
Right. Is there an industry standard for how municipalities accept digital signatures?
Yes. Now, the industry standard is being enforced by the state of Florida. It was not enforced until recently, until a year or 2 years ago. It depends on which city actually cares. So the state of Florida has rejected a lot of documents that were previously accepted because they were not third-party authenticated. They had signer's identity unknown bugs, many, many reasons. So basically, some cities are now saying, okay, well, we need to teach our clients how to sign properly. So the industry standard can be found on the state of Florida's website. I don't know exactly where, but you can ask your city that you're trying to submit to, and they will provide that to you. I believe I have that somewhere, but you guys, let's not get into it now. We can, after this presentation, you guys can ask me, and I can look for it. We can also talk. You can also schedule a three-way call with me and whichever municipality you're dealing with, to see if you need me to be the liaison to communicate that to them and to see what they say, because all cities are different. Some cities are still accepting physical signatures, actually drawn by hand with a pencil, with a pen and paper. And many cities are not. They're only accepting digital ones. Some of them don't even mind if they're third-party authenticated. So the cities are inconsistent, but they're starting to follow the laws from the state of Florida. And the state of Florida requires third-party authenticated signatures for all official submittals. So, and there's more details. Like I said, you can ask your city and they can provide all those the details for you.
All right. We do have a few more here, so we'll get through the ones we can. We have a third-party agency reviewing plans prior to the building department. They keep telling us that our sheets are locked and they cannot place their stamps. Do we need to use document certification instead of digital seal?
Good question. It's the opposite. If you use document certification, stamps can't be created. Even though you may allow for markups to be created, sometimes stamps are not allowed. So you want to use a regular digital signature, and then they should be able to place a stamp. So for example, if I go back to my file, this one's been signed twice by me with a regular signature. If I go to Tools and Stamp, I can place my stamps, no problem. So I can just place this Cloud Plus one, which is just a placeholder. There we go. That one came out nice. And if we look in properties, this is a stamp. Yes. So yes, if you use regular digital signature, you can definitely place stamps. This is another reason why I recommend that you use a regular digital signature to allow for others to place stamps, to sign afterwards, to create signature fields afterwards. Whatever needs to be done can be done, and it will not invalidate your signature. Although in my case, it kind of has, but luckily we do have that click to view this version option. So it's not really invalid. Good question.
All right. Can you create a custom stamp using Illustrator and load it into Bluebeam? If yes, how do you make this dynamic?
Oh, cool. Yes. So as long as you can export that stamp from Illustrator to as a PDF, to make it dynamic, if there's text in Illustrator, I don't know if that text is necessarily going to be read as vector data. You'll still want to basically ensure that when you open up Review and you double click on that text, you want to make sure that that text, there's a drop down for the dynamic like I showed earlier. And then you'll need to basically either add your own text or change the existing text. Now, if you want to use JavaScript, that's a whole other story. You would use Illustrator to prepare your stamp. I'm assuming that you want to use Illustrator to put in your seal or your municipality's logo, for example, or your own company's logo, which is great. And if that's the case, just you get all the visual assets ready in Illustrator. Don't worry about the text. And then in Review, once you import that stamp from Illustrator as a PDF into Bluebeam Revu, then you'll want to type in all the text. You can use the dynamic stuff for dates, for example, and then make a form field for JavaScript, work with whoever knows how to use JavaScript, and then you can get all the custom inputs and all the different choices you can make. So very interesting question.
Okay, this is a clarification from the prior question about multiple signers, I believe. I think I need to be more clear. Can different people digitally sign a document? For example, an architect and a local electric company.
Yes, of course. So when I was signing two times, that was me pretending to be somebody else. It doesn't matter that it's me twice. So yes, I can sign, if I give this document to someone else, they can sign it. Yes, so you can have 3, 4, 5, infinite amounts of people can sign a file. And because I used a regular digital signature, I can create signature fields whenever I need to for the third person, the fourth person. Anybody can sign as many times as they need to and create signature fields after the first document, the first signature is created. So yes, I think you just thought that because I signed twice, it was just me signing twice. It doesn't really matter whether it's me or anybody else. But yes, the answer is yes.
Okay, follow up to the question about the company that's checking their signatures and unable to do a stamp, I think, right? So
Yep.
regarding my previous question on digital seal versus document certification, we do use digital seal and they say they cannot stamp our drawings. Adobe has a lock versus unlock button option. Does Bluebeam have something like that?
So
Otherwise, I am not sure what to do.
so you said two things that I found interesting. You said the word digital seal. I don't know if you're referring to a digital signature, because if you're using it, and the second thing was Adobe. If you're talking about Adobe, and if you're trying to use Adobe to sign, I can't really help you directly because I'm not an Adobe certified instructor. I'm a Bluebeam certified instructor. So if you're using Bluebeam Revu, you just need to use digital signature. And I've just tested it right here. I signed my file digitally twice. Doesn't really matter if you sign it once or twice, and I can insert stamps. Now, if the reviewer, that third-party company that you've hired, if they are using Adobe and they're not able to place stamps, then that means that their stamps are considered a different kind of asset, and that's a whole nother story. But in our case, I'm using Bluebeam Revu, and I'm expecting many municipalities and third-party companies to also be using Bluebeam Revu and checking this. However, Adobe and Bluebeam Revu's markups tend to be similar to each other. So I'm slightly surprised that they're not able to place a stamp. But if you want to contact us afterwards, please clarify whether or not you're talking about digital signature, because there is no digital seal option in Bluebeam Revu. But yes, if you're using a regular digital signature, other people should be able to place stamps, markups, and basically, any other assets that they need to on the drawing.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I know we're getting to the end of time here. We have 3 more questions that came in. I'm going to cut it off there. So hang out if you can. If not, we understand, and we'll see you on the next one. But next question we have here, how do you create a placement field?
So to make a form field, you can only do this with Review Extreme. You can go to the Tools dropdown, mouse over Form, and I have these options here. Now let me go to a document that has not been signed because you can't really create regular form fields after signing. Luckily, you can create signature fields after signing. So Tools, Form, and the form fields that are very common are the text box one. Now, the text box one is similar to this one up here. So once I make it, I can basically press the escape key, and then I can type any data that I want to. And so to edit a form field, I can either click on my Forms tab and I can select the text box. So this happens to be text 4. And then I can right click in this panel or on top of the text box and I can delete it. And there's many different kinds of form fields. So we have radio buttons, checkboxes, et cetera, and of course, digital signature is here for the second time. So you can actually see that the digital signature is a form field, but it's also found in its own panel. So very, very interesting. Yes, good question.
Right, and one last one. Batch signing a file makes it much larger. What is your experience in a city accepting a single digital signature on the first sheet versus digital signatures on every sheet?
I think that one signature on the first sheet should be enough. I know that some cities require that each page needs to be signed. There are some legal reasons for that, but not all cities and not all states are requiring that. They're all a little bit inconsistent. I think that, yeah, one signature on the first page is usually enough, and try that first. If they don't accept it and they require you to put it on every single page, then you can do so. If the file is too big, then you can either try and use the city's submittal website to submit it, and if that's too big, you can send it via WeTransfer or another file transfer protocol. And yeah, I know the signatures actually contain data, and the batch signing tool may contain more data than just a regular signature. So in that instance, you may want to just use a regular signature and see how much bigger the file gets. And hopefully it's not too big. So good question.
And somebody did send us here, Florida statutes require each architectural sheet to be individually signed and sealed. So just,
Yep.
I guess it depends on the municipality, but at least per Florida law, I guess.
Yep. Florida law
All right.
requires it, and all municipalities are starting to follow Florida law, which is good.
Yep. All right, perfect. So Ari, jump over to that next slide for me. We're just going to go ahead and close out here. So thank you all for attending and for staying through. We do actually have a little surprise for you guys that did stay along till now. So our blog is live. Check it out at the link on the screen. We do offer Bluebeam Revu training, and just contact us if you're interested in more information about that. Also check our website out for free trials of Bluebeam Revu. And if you need to get in contact with us, you can shoot us an email at info@ddscad.com or give us a call at 305-445-6480. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.